Well, imagine that you took your team on a bowling outing and you roll the ball and then you don't see where it goes. You don't see if how many pins you knock down or anything. And everybody's like blindfolded or something. How fun would that be? That would be so boring, right? It's the score that makes it invigorating. Like the whole gamification, like you said, that gives us that dopamine hit when we hit a strike, when we hit a spare. So you have to have some type of metrics, otherwise you're just bowling in the dark. Welcome to the Kingspiration podcast. This is the place where you'll learn how to get unstuck and gain momentum in your life and business. Each week, we tackle the real aspects of entrepreneurship, personal development, relationships, and fitness. I'm your co-host, Ethan King, from Atlanta, Georgia, USA, entrepreneur, TEDx speaker, and best-selling author of Wealth Beyond Money.
And I'm your co-host, Justin King, no relation to Ethan, from Cape Town, South Africa, entrepreneur, speaker, and business growth strategist. Our journey crosses continents and cultures, sharing wisdom and experiences to propel you forward. Welcome to Kingspiration. Let's start the conversation.
Today, we are talking about how to acquire a new skill, how to put a new notch on your utility belt. So how do we do that? We have 4 steps outlined for you today. And kind of the origin of this is I was meeting in one of my entrepreneur mastermind groups, and I noticed that a good friend of mine has a pattern, and he's a very successful guy. And right now, he's training for a triathlon. And in training for this triathlon, he started working with a coach, and that coach is holding him accountable for certain metrics. And then, of course, he has the deadline with the triathlon itself, and he wants to meet a certain time. And I noticed a pattern that he does the same thing in his businesses, where he partners with a coach or a mentor and has a board of directors that holds them accountable for certain KPIs and metrics. And then they have quarterly goals that they want to achieve. So they have that deadline built in. So I'm noting a trend here and a pattern. So let's break down the steps today and see if does this apply to acquiring any new skill or leveling up in life. So with that said, number 1 we have here, Justin, is to hire a coach or a mentor. So tell me about your experience with that in your life.
Yeah, so one step back, when you brought this topic up, the first thing that came to mind and why I really love it is because acquiring a new skill can actually be the fundamental step to growth. I think we all want to grow, and we speak about personal growth and personal development, but that can be quite a broad statement. And this provides laser focus on one thing. And that's why I like the word skill here, one thing that you can improve on. And by focusing on that one thing that you can improve on, ultimately a byproduct of that is going to be personal development or personal growth. Or ultimately, if you use this in your business, it's growth in your business as well. So first one, hiring a coach or a mentor. You don't have to try and convince me on this. I am a business coach. So that is what I do with a lot of clients. I'll always say, bring in somebody from the outside. And I think when it comes to hiring a coach or finding a mentor or finding somebody that can just experience share with you, the biggest thing, look, it's very linked to our second point that we'll bring up in a second. But the biggest thing with this external person is just, it's hard to read the label from inside the bottle. And what I mean by that is you kind of become numb or blind to the things that very often hold you back. And by bringing that external person in, they're not as close to those problems as you are, and they're able to challenge you on that, and they're able to point those out for you. It's the blind spots that are kind of the anchor and the chain that are holding us back. So a mentor or a coach can provide a framework, they can provide experience, they can provide experience shares that really are going to set you free, but also provide, as I say, that external perspective that so often we struggle to get ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, this can apply to anything. If I want to grow my business from $1 million in revenue to 10 million in revenue, well, find someone who's done it before, where 10 million is nothing to them because they've crossed that bridge a long time ago, and then hang around that person and you'll begin to pick up on things and emulate things. And if they know your goal, they can help you get there and point out where you're going right, where you're going wrong. So that's business. But even if it were something as simple as, let's say I wanted to learn a new language, if I wanted to become fluent in Spanish, well, I can do Duolingo, which, by the way, I have about a 600-day streak on Duolingo right now in Spanish, which is, I'm pretty good. Hablo poquito español, but pero I'm not comfortably fluent yet. And the reason why is because I haven't followed this framework. But what I don't have a coach or mentor that I speak to every day. But if I did, like say I had someone come to my house and I just held conversations with them, they only spoke to me in Spanish every single day, that would advance my learning and my fluency probably by tenfold or a hundredfold. Now I do have friends that I meet in other countries and I keep in touch with them on like WhatsApp and we only speak in Spanish, so that helps a little bit, but there's nothing like that everyday immersion around someone who's been there, done it before. So step
Love it.
two, yeah, so step two we have there has to be accountability and metrics. So not only do you have the coach and the mentor, but what are they holding you accountable for? Like what metrics, like if you really want to take this skill to a next level. So I think first of all, figuring out what those KPIs, those key performance indicators are is key. And your mentor should be able to help work with you and do that. But let's say like my friend who's running the triathlon, who's training for the triathlon. Well, his coach is looking at the pace of his running and the pace of his swimming and his cycling. He's looking at the nutrition, like what is he putting into his body every single day, watching the food log. So these are the metrics. And then if something's off, he'll get back and say, hey, watch out here. That way you have your mental number one plays into number two. Your mentor plays into the accountability and metrics because you have someone watching to tell you when you're steering off course and kind of get you back in line.
Yeah. I, I think for me, it's the classic saying, what is measured matters. So you want to find those key elements. And another favorite of mine is how do you best what you don't test? But in this particular instance, it's just what is measured matters. And what I often say to clients is, how do you know at the end of this period whether you're going to be able to give yourself a big green tick to say, yes, I've achieved it, or a big red cross to say, whoops, I didn't quite get it across the line. And that's where metrics, numbers come into play, because numbers do not lie, and you cannot bullshit a number. You've either achieved it or you haven't. So a lot of the time linked to these metrics would be this classic SMART goals. So making sure that you're following a SMART structure and setting your goal, and is it the M in the SMART, it being that measurable element. And then it also, and I think Ethan, you do this with so much with a lot of your fitness, is it gamifies it for you as well. Like you've got a great dashboard, and it brings an element of entertainment to what you're doing as well as holding you accountable. And then when you get to the end of that period, you can't lie. You've either achieved it or you haven't. But understanding what those core metrics are, those key metrics that you need to be following and really measuring yourself against, I think that's, as you've said, that's where that mentor, that coach is going to play a huge role in making sure that you're tracking towards the correct things.
Yeah. Imagine if you didn't have metrics. There's an example in a book that I read. I think it's either The Great Game of Business or Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. But it's about motivating your team to hit certain metrics in your business. Well, imagine that you took your team on a bowling outing and you roll the ball and then you don't see where it goes. You don't see if how many pins you knock down or anything. And everybody's like blindfolded or something. How fun would that be? That would be so boring, right? It's the score that makes it invigorating. Like the whole gamification, like you said, that gives us that dopamine hit when we hit a strike, when we hit a spare. So you have to have some type of metrics, otherwise you're just bowling in the dark.
Bowling in the dark, and you don't know how much time is left in the game. So another example that I always use is, and I've got to remind everybody of this every now and again, but South Africa won the Rugby World Cup at the end of last year, and we won the quarterfinal, the semi-final, and the final all by a single point. And even just as a spectator, imagine watching that and having no idea what the score is or how much time was left in the game. I
Mm.
mean, it would be a nightmare, and the players would have no idea what to do. So again, your metrics, to your point, your metrics become your scoreboard. They tell you how much time is left in the game, and what do you need I mean, we call it a try, but do you need a field goal? Do you need to score a touchdown?
Mm.
Like how many bases are loaded? It gives you that information, so you know what you need to achieve in the time period that's left.
Yeah, love it. And so next here, Justin, for step three, you have catalytic event. And what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so a catalytic event really comes from, and you referenced scaling up, but it comes from the scaling up framework. And in particular, it comes from having a brand promise that you promise to your clients. And essentially, a brand promise is what experience do you promise your customer or your client every time they interact with you? That's one part of it. There's also a brand promise guarantee. And essentially, a guarantee is a bit of a pain point. It's going to cost you something if you don't uphold that experience that you want to uphold for your customer or your client. And they also call that the catalytic event because it catalyzes or ignites a fire within the team, within the organization to ensure that they deliver on the promise. Otherwise, it is going to cost us X. And X could be money, X could be investing more time, X could be replacing the product for free, whatever it may be. Simple example, as far as business and products go, is Domino's Pizza. I know they've changed it now, but back in the day, Domino's Pizza was we deliver in 30 minutes or less. That's their brand promise of their experience, or it is free. That was their guarantee. That was this catalytic event that held them accountable.
Mm.
So I like this idea when you're trying to master a new skill that you've got a mentor, you've got a coach, you've got your metrics. So what is your catalytic event? And while we've been chatting, I think it's actually very closely linked to the coach, to be honest, Ethan, because a catalytic event here could be the fact that you have invested, you've taken money and you've invested in having a coach to help hold you accountable, help put the right metrics in place, help you become the athlete or the person or the businessman that you're wanting to become. And that catalytic event is, if I'm not going to do this, if I'm not doing the work, I'm busy basically throwing money onto the fire. So I really do like the idea of having skin in the game, money in the game, like you're investing in yourself, you're investing in this new skill. And that to me can be tied very closely to this catalytic event. It is that pain that you will experience flushing cash down the loo because I'm not achieving and executing on what my intentions are.
Yeah. Love that. And to me, the key word here is there has to be some pain if you don't hit what you're trying to hit or acquire that skill, because that is the big motivator. Love that. And then the final
Exactly
step
it.
here, which I think kind of ties into that, is there has to be a deadline. You got to give yourself a deadline, something on the calendar to where, you're on stage or you're on the field, you're on the track, So for example, for me, or I think about my friend who's running the triathlon. Obviously, you have the triathlon coming up. I think about my kids. My kids take music lessons. Like my daughter takes piano, my son takes drums. And at first, when they were practicing these things over and over again, I would think to myself, man, they need a performance or something. There needs to be some stakes to where they actually have to use the skills because that's what's going to accelerate it. So I like the music school that they're with because every quarter they have a performance in front of a live audience where they actually have to play the piece that they've been rehearsing. And it really holds your feet to the fire. You know it's coming up and it gives you a purpose for what you're practicing.
It's Duke Ellington that said, don't give me time. What I need is a deadline."
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Really
because
good.
yeah, I mean, and that's it. We'll continue kicking that can down the road. We'll always try to convince ourselves that we're doing the work, that we're slowly improving. I need to take time in order to become better at the skill that I'm trying to enhance. But unless you're going to measure yourself at some point and have that deadline, that line drawn in the sand, it does become an exercise in kicking that can down the road. I think possibly out of everything, the deadline is probably one of the most important.
It is. You got to have that big motivator. And I can think of so many examples, but with learning Spanish, like I'll have a trip coming up where I'm going to a Spanish speaking country. I want to be able to communicate fluently. That will give me a sense of urgency and really accelerating my Spanish. When it comes to my fitness programs, like in Six Pack Dads, one of the modules that I have early on is you need to book a shirt off event. I call it a shirt off event where you're going to be either on vacation or on stage. You could be in a bodybuilding physique contest, whatever, but somewhere where you're going to have your shirt off so that you feel that pain. There's this story I love to reference about Arnold Schwarzenegger and his calves. Have you heard this story where he was so, when in his early days of bodybuilding, he was so ashamed because he had small calves and it really, really bothered him. But instead of like covering up his calves, he decided to wear these short shorts every day so that he would feel humiliated among this bodybuilder community. I'm sure compared to my calves, they were already massive, but by his standards, he was not satisfied. So he intentionally humiliated himself by wearing shorts every day and focusing on his calves. And, to our earlier points, he had a mentor, one of his buddies in the gym, who he really admired his calves. And this dude would do like 1,000 reps of 1,000 pounds or something crazy. And Arnold Schwarzenegger said, I'm going to do that. So not only did he have that reminds me of the pain, the catalytic event. It's like the shame of having puny calves, but he also followed the mentor, and he had the accountability and the metrics of the exact weight and exact reps that he needed to do. And I guess he had the deadline. He was in all kinds of bodybuilding contests. So he definitely hit all four with that.
But so the last thing that really comes to mind with regards to the deadline is all of this again is this idea of needing to practice in public. And I think maybe that's a lot from public speaking. Mm-hmm. And we've both heard Richard Mulholland say that a ton of times, but this idea of practicing in public. And as true as that is for public speaking, because you can do all the reps in the world, you can deliver your talk in front of the mirror 1,000 times until you get on stage and there's 350 people in front of you. It's a different beast altogether, and that's where you measure yourself. So that's where you say, okay, I'm at this point. I could have delivered that a lot better, but I'm measuring myself, and then you go back to how do I carry on enhancing this skill? And it's almost like I see it as it's a flywheel. And this just continues to go until you master your skill. It's exciting. For me, this just simplifies so many things in my own mind.
For sure. All right. So that's how you acquire new skills. Step 1, hire a coach or mentor. Step 2, make sure you're being held accountable for some metrics. Step 3, there needs to be a catalytic event that involves some pain if you don't meet the goal. And step 4, you don't need more time. You need a deadline. That wraps it up, or did you have any other thoughts, Justin?
That's it. I think that's a goodie. Thanks, Ethan.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Kingspiration. We hope this conversation sparked insights to ignite action in your life and business.
We're on this journey together, sharing our challenges and successes to help all of us take the next step towards building momentum and ultimately reaching our goals.
If you found value in today's episode, please share it with someone else who might benefit and leave us a 5-star review.
And remember to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on our weekly conversations. Until next time, keep rolling, keep growing, and keep being inspired.